The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. Tuesday morning, and I'm super excited to be here with you. So, a couple of housekeeping items as we always go through it. One, for those who got our books, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are awesome because the partial profits from our books go to entrepreneurs impacted by challenges, and we share it with kiva.org. If you're interested, feel free to go there directly and share it out and get a book. So thank you for showing us your love. And as always, I'm going to ask you to spend that 1 hour of your time every month with no strings attached and helping people out. So folks, I hope each and every one of you is doing well, and we will jump straight into our show. So we are going to welcome Névine Zariffa. Welcome, Névine.
Thank you. So pleased to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful having you here. So folks, Névine is a mathematician and from pure core science field. Her journey is going up to a fictional author. And I got to share that I have had the pleasure to be part of her journey, last part of the journey where she became a fictional author. So it's just been a pure delight. And I'm so delighted to interview today to get a little peek behind your book and your journey. So welcome, Névine.
Thank you, Divya.
We usually start out in the childhood. So Névine, share with us if you have any remarkable moments that stand out in your memory even today from your childhood.
Oh my gosh, in my memory. Well, I'll tell you something that stands out in my parents' memory, and that's leaving Egypt. When I was just 6 months old, I was their first, and I was the baby that accompanied them as they left the country they were born and raised in, were married in, had their first baby, and went to snowy, cold Montreal, Canada. And just to make it worse, they arrived in December. And they could only carry Divya. They could only bring in what they could carry. And I was one of the 9 bundles that they carried into the country. And truthfully, that put my life on a whole different track, as you can imagine. I would have grown up very differently in the Middle East, in a country like Egypt. And the main reason my parents left was so that their little girl would have the world of opportunities that they wanted for her. So I think that's probably the most memorable part of my childhood, followed quite shortly after by a little adventure my sister and I had in Montreal, where our parents were looking at an apartment for the family, left us in the car. I was maybe 4 or 5, and I decided I would drive like my father. So we both jumped into the front seat of the car and drive, or neutral, I guess, and we went down a hill through a busy intersection into the flower bed of another apartment building. And I tell you this story only because what I remember, you asked for childhood memories. I remember my father comforting me in the middle of the night because I was feeling so bad. I had wrecked the family's car. And he said, "Don't worry, darling, we'll get another car." And we were poor immigrants. I mean, we'd get another car. And the next morning, my mom heard me announcing very proudly to the neighbor that we were getting a new car. So both those things I remember from growing up.
Well, thankfully, you and your sister were okay.
Yes, we were. Yeah.
It could have ended up in some tragedy. And oh, it's scary. And yet, when you look back upon it, it's funny, it's humorous.
It's humorous. It's kind of one of the funny stories that my mom always brought out when she was visiting and meeting some of my teams when I was a team leader, director, manager, VP, whatever. She'd come to visit and they'd always think, "What was she like as a kid?" She'd trot that one out. And they all loved it, of course.
Of course. So, as you grew up, what were your interests in high school?
So this is a great question. And anyone in the audience who is a child of immigrants probably has this in common with me. We were really told education was the way to go. And my mother in particular was very clear that she wanted her daughters to be independent, and that was really through education. So I was a bit of a bookworm. I was one of these little nerds who was at the top of the class. I worked sort of hard, but not that hard. So I was a bit on the lazy side. Things came easily to me, but I loved literature. And what I loved about literature was that I could kind of cast my mind to what the characters were living and try and understand why they made the decisions that they made. And so I grew up in this kind of academic, little nerdy, not at all athletic, into reading, into literature, and trying to be a good girl. I went to a Catholic all-girls school. So we had itchy uniforms and we, tried to conform, though I was a bit of a rebel, and just worked hard to make my parents proud.
Well, I can definitely imagine you being a rebel. So, do you have any stories about rebelling?
Oh boy, do I have stories. So one day we had these uniforms and we had to wear only white or dark blue socks. And so one way to express ourselves was, of course, to wear different kinds of stockings. And so I came in with these very fancy socks of all colors, and I was caught out. And at recess, I was called to the head nun's office. And I quickly changed socks with one of my friends and showed up there prim and proper in my navy blue socks. And she asked me, what's that about? And I bold-faced lied that I'd been wearing the right socks all along. But on a serious note, I decided that I didn't really want to go to the mass. They had rotating masses, and I thought that was a bit of an imposition, and my best friend was Jewish. And I didn't understand why we would have to do that. So I asked to be dispensed, to which the nun said, "Fine, but you're going to sit in the teacher's hall and write me an essay why." And Divya, not only I, but a third of the class sat in that hall writing the essay in an act of rebellion.
So you had not only doing it yourself, you had people following you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Ah, that is priceless. So as you continued your journey in college, what got your attention from career-wise and what made you decide to follow it?
Well, now, remember, I had a mom who was dead set that her daughters would be independent and have a career. That was the key to independence in her view. And so my dad was a physician, he's actually a psychiatrist, so one of those. And Dad was like, "She'll be a doctor." And little Névine is like, "I don't like the sight of blood. Why would I be a doctor?" And so it was like, what can I earn a wage with? And I thought science. But I didn't have the patience. Remember, I said I was a little lazy. I didn't have the patience for lab work. So it took me to mathematics. So I did pure math, which of course is very intellectually difficult, but also doesn't have a ton of career options, at least not at that time. Today, you could do machine learning and AI and all that. So I went into statistics, and statistics was my career. And it was a fantastic run because, as an expert in the study of how to construct experiments, how to interpret the data from the experiments, you get to work with all these bright minds, all these researchers. So I was learning a lot about their ideas, cutting edge science, but bringing my skills, statistics, to the table. The only other funny story about that is, of course, I'm this young woman in a field that's just all men, Divya. It was all men. And my mom thought that was great because, as independent as she wanted me to be, she also wanted me to meet a man. She thought, oh, this is great. She's going to meet boys in the math program. To which I came back after the first day and said, Mom, they're all boys, but boy, are they nerdy. And as we know, later on in life, nerdy is good. But at that time, I'm like, oh, no, Mom, that was not the reason to go into math.
Well, of course, at a young age, you're looking to have fun. And as a recovering nerd myself,
Oh.
I know people, I don't get me wrong, I had some great friends, and yet I was always the brunt of the jokes. Oh,
Oh,
yeah, you'd rather prefer to sit down with a book
that's
and
right.
get lost in there rather than do this X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, I love hanging out, I love socializing. And yet, when it comes to it, anybody who talks about books, like, oh, books are like, yeah, it just gets me all riled up.
That's
So
right.
I totally get it how young ones tend to shy away from nerdy. And as you mentioned, that being a nerd is good, as you found out later on, because it's important to have that balance in life. So as you continued your journey, where did your career take you?
So I started off in agriculture, and I grew up in Montreal, very cosmopolitan, diverse city. Did my graduate studies outside of Toronto. And then my first job takes me to this tiny little town because that's where you do agriculture, don't you know? And so I spent 3 years there learning how to work with scientists. And it was a fantastic experience, number of levels. But I needed to get back to a big town, Divya. And your audience probably recognizes this, and I'm sure you've had this with your clients in your own life. Things are very random. You kind of get lucky, and I got super lucky. I ended up in Philadelphia working for a pharmaceutical company, but in their very early drug development studies. So small studies, very data rich, where you're carefully evaluating if the molecule has any promise whatsoever, and you're making sure it has no safety issues. And so I learned super quickly. There were a lot of different diseases we were trying to tackle and to help patients with. And I sort of grew up in Philly from a professional standpoint. And I had these wonderful colleagues that kept challenging me. And I learned how to work. That was hard, hard work. No more laziness for Névine. No way. And I loved it. And I kept growing. I had more responsibility. I got involved in a big FDA research program with academia and other pharmas. And then something really pivotal happened, probably the most important feature of my adult life. I, at the age of 33, was diagnosed with leukemia. And that put me on a whole other trajectory.
I know from our conversations, Névine, that was a major event, but it led to a lot of realization and was a turning moment for you. So can you share with us how hard it was and how you get out of it?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating story for me, and it's kind of created all the threads that I hold dear today in life. And I would say I've described this kind of high intensity career, lots of flying around, lots of challenge intellectually, but I can't say that I was all that happy. And I'll jump straight to the punchline. About a year after my diagnosis, I realized I was a lot happier. So let me unpack that for you. So young person living by myself and in a town where all my family was in another whole other country, actually. And I had to look deep within myself to figure out what I was going to do with this diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And there were, of course, all the company contacts. So I had the privilege of connecting with all the best in the world who were either conducting research or had at that time, the best treatment options. And you know what? They weren't great treatment options, let's be really honest. So here I am sort of preparing for the worst. But at the same time, I had this thought that, if I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it because both my brain, which understands medical research, but my heart and my emotions have come into balance. Because actually, none of us know how much time we have on this earth. And so what better, to this disease, could I do on my own, but to live as good a life as I could for the amount of time I had. And to me, Divya, this was getting things in balance. I had so overexpressed the brain, and I had lost track of joy, happiness, emotions, spirituality, and I started to work on those. Started with the meditation, started with the integrative line of holistic medicine as an add-on to traditional Western medicine. Got into therapy, into counseling to explore those things that I thought were holding me back. And I didn't have any better prognosis a year later, but I had a better life. Mm-hmm. And you know what happened? This fantastic, again, random event, the universe, here I am preparing for this short life. The universe gets a new medicine out. A brand new medicine to treat my kind of leukemia. And I have been in remission ever since, going on well over 20 years. But now living my life in a whole different way.
And I'm so happy that you went into remission and that option came along so that you could move past and share your story with others, because that is so powerful. So many of us think, there are a lot of people out there who think, it's my experience, what good it is, and why should I share it? And here's what I'll share, that when you share your experience, when you share your message with masses, it's not only your responsibility, it's your obligation to do so, because there may be somebody who's struggling with what you went through and you came out at the other end, and your transformation could become the survival guide for somebody else. So just from a humanity perspective, when you're sharing your story, whether it doesn't have to be on media, it can be sharing story with your friends, or it could be on social media. If not on social media, sharing it in some form or shape, and allowing other people to see that vulnerability, allowing other people to see that you went through that journey, and creating and holding that space for them so that they can get out of that area as well.
So I think that's a good point that you make, Divya. And what I've noticed over the years is that people take a different element of the story, the one that resonates for them where they are today. And you don't know when you're sharing which part of that whole tableau is really going to strike a person. But when it strikes them and when it helps another person, that's absolutely priceless. And it gives another meaning to the why did it happen to me? Okay, I did what I did. I got very, very lucky. I made better decisions about how to live my life. But if there's something in there that actually helps another person meaningfully, might have just been worth it.
Absolutely. So a lot of our listeners may be thinking, okay, you moved beyond that. But let's say somebody is going through challenges, adversities in their lives in some form or shape and are thinking, why me? What did you do and what could you share so that people can make that transition to live that happy life?
Yeah. I don't know that I have the full recipe. Smarter people than me probably have a good idea. I'll tell you what was really impactful for me. And these exist today, and I think they're getting more popular. The concept of a journal of abundance, where no matter what's happening in your life every day, you sit and you reflect on 5 good things. Could be anything, could be small thing, could be big thing, could be a medium thing, could be something that happened to another person. But that discipline of every day focusing on at least 5 good things reframes, I think it rewires your brain. I think it rewires your brain. And when your brain is rewired that way, it can think and explore more freely. And then you might get to the point where you're making decisions for yourself. So, where you can empower yourself, where you can get out of the look, I didn't have a choice. I got leukemia. I can't modulate that. I can't make it different. I just have the disease. But you know how many other decisions I can make that are truly within my control? That gave me a huge sense of empowerment, and it made me stand taller. I'll be very honest about that. And then you're not alone. There are going to be these people who can help, and they might come from the most unexpected corner. All I would say is accept their help because you're going to need it. So if you can introduce a bit of joy by focusing on the positives, but do it every day, just write it down, 5 things. If you can look at what's in front of you and make decisions where you can, things that you think will be better for you. One decision I made, still make it today. If it brings you positive energy, keep it. If it doesn't, get rid of it. So those are things you can do today. You get empowered. And then allow yourself the space to be surprised by what others can do to help. So do lean on other people. Those are the 3 things I would say, Divya, in addition to maybe just take it one step at a time. And in that moment of each step, you will find something that's positive for you. That isn't just about what's making your heart heavy. So maybe there's something in the Buddhist tradition of being present and being aware and in with the world around you that I might throw in there as a 4th.
That's really powerful, Névine. I like how you said create that space to be surprised, that abundance. And that is so true because I've gone through my personal challenges one time when I had broken my shoulder. And I had gone into the depths of darkness because how could I lean on anyone? And especially women, as women, we are nurturers and we tend to be there for everyone. We don't want to take anybody's help. It's okay. It's okay to be wanting help. It's okay to ask for help. And listeners, you'll be surprised that if you open up the space, not only to universe, not only to people, how many new things can come. And I really like another thing that you mentioned, Névine, is that if it doesn't work for you, if it's not getting your energy in the positive direction, let it go. And we can look at the fish tanks, right? If you do not clean the environment, and let's say, and of course this happened uh, when kids are young, they want fish and they want all different types of pets. So we had a saltwater tank, and I was learning how to clean. I hadn't kept fish before, and I was doing something wrong where it was getting contaminated. And of course, it was looking really bad. And I'm like, okay, what's happening?
Mm.
So then we changed the water out, and it had to be at a certain pH. We hadn't gotten the pH right. And it was amazing. Not only it was able to create that ecosystem where we only had to maintain it a little bit. Fish started looking healthy because they were drooping. So we are no different than fish. So it's important to not only check your internal environment, but it's also important to check your external environment as to how things are working with you. Are they aligning with you? Are you in harmony with them? So Névine, as you continued your journey
Mm.
through the science, working with FDA, working with leadership in different companies, being a consultant, how did the germ of an idea of being an author come?
Yeah, so you remember the story of how I picked science. Well, you know what I tried for college first? I tried to convince my parents I should do French literature. Yeah, French literature, that's going to get you a job, which was essentially mom's reaction. But she said it to me differently. She said, oh dear, get a degree that leads to a job, and then later you can go back to that as a hobby. And so I kind of really doubled down after I was in remission, because I thought if others had helped me through medical research and pharmaceutical development, I should help others.
Mm.
So I kind of doubled down. And then after a while, I was like, but I want to live my life. And I thought, let me go back to that hobby idea. Can I do it as a hobby? And I thought, no, I really need dedicated time. So I took a year off work. I left my first company, GlaxoSmithKline, and I took a year to write. And I wrote 2 books. And you know this world, the corporate world, and the kind of work I do is very niche. It's very rare. The phone was ringing and people wanted to invite me to come consider this, that opportunity. And so I made a deal with my husband. I was married by then. And I said, Ed, either I sell my book or I find a job I'm really excited in. We'll give it 6 months. And it was so hard to get published back then that, of course, I found a job that I liked. And I put the book in the drawer, but not writing. I kept writing little snippets. And I went to an even bigger job and harder and more senior. That was AstraZeneca. And after a total of 25 years in pharma, it was like, okay, I'm really done now. I'm really done. I've done it all in my field. I've risen as far as I can. I've developed people in their careers, and we've put so many medicines out there. And I thought, that's it. It's my time. So let me do 2 things. And I was pretty bold. And people kind of looked at me quizzically. You know, the eyebrows went up and they were curious when I said I want to do 2 things in my retirement. I want to have more impact on healthcare. And I want to have time for the people I love and the things I love how to do, like writing. And so that was the consulting that you mentioned. And that, right, I'm reintroducing writing. And that's how I came to meet you. And of course, your absolutely seminal, critical force in helping me to get this first book of mine published.
Oh, I was just a guide on the side. You're the star on the stage, taking those decisions. And it's hard. It's hard as a writer to let go of your baby. That's how I see
Mm.
that. Let's say you're a new mom and You're taking this precious piece of yourself, your heart and soul, and handing it over either to a nanny or to somebody in daycare. And just the process of letting it go and just the process of letting it blossom is hard. So if people are thinking about writing and they are fearful, I'm going to put myself out there. What are other people going to think? Are they, is my work good enough to be out there? Should I be publishing it? Because once it's gone, it's gone. You can't take it back. Because if some people have bought the books, even if you pull the book off the market, it's out there, it's floating, it's there forever. What would you tell our audience?
So this one is easy. And it comes from, believe it or not, the mathematical probabilistic field of decision theory.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of mumbo jumbo jargon, but here's the idea. You could think of you're on a certain path, and the path is you want to write, but you're a little scared. I think that's what you described, that you might be scared of putting it out there. But you want to write. That's the path you're on. And you can stay on that path, being scared and never getting your book out. Or you can at least explore in your own mind to start, what might happen if I did write it? If I did put it out there? What's the best that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? And then what's in the middle? What's the most likely? So what's the worst? Maybe nobody likes it. Maybe that's the worst you can imagine. In the middle, you're going to think there's a whole lot of people who are going to enjoy it, and some that might not, and a few that are going to love it. And then that upside is that a ton of people are going to love it. So what I do, Divya, is I think about, okay, path number one, the path I'm on, is the status quo. I know it. Path number two has upside, but this kind of a risk of the downside. So I let my mind go there. And you should too. You say, okay, what would I do if everybody hates it? Well, maybe I'll write another better one after. Maybe I'll go back to my job, but now I've exhausted my dream. So I'm comfortable that I've done it. I'll be proud because I did it my way. And if other people didn't like it, well, okay, I learned something. And then you'll realize that path number two, it's all upside because you know what to do with the downside. You know what to do with that scary event that it probably isn't going to happen anyway, but you've thought about it, you're prepared, and everything else will be positive. Everything else will be on the upside for you. And that would be my advice. Always go explore the alternative path before you decide to stay on your status quo. Because the status quo is just going to get you more of the same. The alternative path where you take a risk, odds are by the time you think it through, you're going to do it better. You're going to minimize the downside. You're going to maximize the upside, and it will surprise you, and it will bring you something good.
Very powerful tips, Névine.
Mathematics in real life.
Yes, and so many people don't realize that science and storytelling goes together because that's what scientists are doing. You propose a hypothesis, you go experiment, and then you go test it out. And all right, so these are my conclusions. This is what the data is telling. And so many elements of science are part of storytelling. And so many people will say that, oh gosh, what does storytelling have to do with science? Storytelling and corporate world doesn't go anything together. And surprisingly, when I was young, I used to write a lot of stories. And of course, I used to subject a lot of poor people who visited our house. I'd read out my stories to them and they'd listen. When you're young, when you're probably, 6, 7, 8 years old, they're being polite. And now I wonder, I wish I could go find them and ask them that, did you really enjoy it? Or were you just being kind to a little girl? And storytelling, and I just kind of get super excited about it. So as I go through my previous journey, I see that I was doing storytelling even in my corporate journey. And I want to ask you, did you use any pieces of storytelling elements in your corporate life?
That is one of the biggest learnings I had. So when I was in my first part of my career at GlaxoSmithKline, here's what I foolishly thought, and it connects with something you said, Divya. I bring my brain to work. The rest of me is mine. You know what? That doesn't work because people are all around you and they kind of suspect you're hiding something, and then they don't trust you, and then they don't listen to you. It's an uphill battle. So I learned, and this was probably what helped fuel my success at AstraZeneca, is that it's all about connecting with people. And connecting with people comes through being a whole human being. And part of that is sharing your story or your stories and finding a way to really connect and engage. And whether it's you're connecting, someone has just had a difficulty in their life and you can bring them that very human response that's more important than work. Let's see how we can help you with that. Or whether it's someone's had a success and you want to celebrate it, or whether it's that encouraging, and you've said it, often it's young women, to really be bold, take that step, and telling them stories about other women so that they can realize that, my gosh, if others can do it, I can too. But yeah, it was pervasive, and it was one of the many ways that I realized that you do better work when you bring all of yourself to work. And that includes the way you see the world, and the way you see the world, you basically translate best by telling a story about it.
That's beautiful, Névine. So tell us about your author journey. How did the characters come up? And just a little teaser, what's your book about?
Well, the book is about two sets of sisters and a random meeting between two of the women. And one of them is at a very difficult time in her life. She's the narrator. She's a young woman. She's been through a lot. She's very sassy, very clear-eyed, and lost. And she's in that veil of grief, as are the people around her. And they take it one day at a time. She meets a mysterious woman who's older, who's French. This one, the narrator's American. And together, in very unexpected ways, they make their way through this part of the young woman's journey. And so it's a short book. It's quite snappy. It's very real in places and sad, but it has, you've heard this word from another very famous woman, it has moments of lift. It has moments of insight. It has a certain sharpness, but also softness. And I think it just reflects life. And so I'm hoping it appeals to some of the folks in the audience. Oh, you're holding the book. Woohoo!
Yes.
There it is.
I love it. These are my and I gotta share, folks. I love the love notes. I call it out of everything. These are my priceless possessions, and I cherish them. I treasure them. And it's almost like being a proud mama when your child goes and achieves great things.
Well, I'm glad you're proud of it. I certainly am. I'm very, very proud of it. And I have to say, I was more excited with this book coming out than any other corporate success I've ever had. So I've loved it. You asked another question that I didn't answer. So you asked the question of how did I write it? And where did the inspiration come from? And I have to tell you, I just wrote, and it was a linear shot. And I was so surprised myself. But as I started to write this, the voice of this character, who is nothing like me or anybody I know, like just not, um, was just so loud. It rang so true in my mind. And I just kept clicking on that little typewriter we call a computer every day. And just very happy with the way it all came out. And I hope others enjoy it too.
Absolutely. And Naveen, usually people have this question: did any of the characters have any relationship to your personal life or to people in your life?
Well, it's a very important question. I have to tell you, one of the decisions I made when I took that time off to write was that in no way, shape, or form would I leverage, I'm going to use that word, or borrow from anyone in my circle, any of my friends or family, the people that I cared about, because they're too important to me, and I didn't want to expose them or make them vulnerable in a way they might not be comfortable with. That said, I think you always bring your own journey to writing anything. If nothing else, just how you take in a street scene. It's part of who you are already, just that filtering that you apply to anything you see in the world. So for me, I would say I had the experience of growing up with a sister whom I love very dearly and who's very, very different from me. But neither one of the characters is her or me in any way. Um, but I must say there's something about the sharpness of the narration, which I think is inherent in me, and that because I'm always in a hurry, I don't know how long I have on this earth. And so I'm always in a hurry, and I always want to do as much as I can, as well as I can, as quickly as I can. And there's a certain edginess to me that is part of the main character. But otherwise, no, it's nobody that I know. It's not me. It's not my story. It's truly a work of fiction.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm definitely partial, folks, to this book. Here's what I can share: that it's really a good read. It grips you, and I invite you to check out Naveen's website. Naveen, do you want to share about your website? Where can people find you, and where can they get your book?
So you can find me on www.nevinezariffa.com. So just my name.com. In there, you'll find details about the book. You'll find some short stories that I've been told people really enjoy, very short stories. And you'll find more about my life story. You can also find me on LinkedIn, though that's a bit more professional in terms of the data, mathematics, statistics, but you can find me there too.
And you did mention about the second book, so I'm sure people are going to be curious about that. Since you let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, can you give us a little peek into it?
Um,
What is the story about?
so that book is a very different kind of book. It is the book about a painter who's a very flawed man, very, very flawed, and the impact that his actions have on the people around him. And so I don't know when this one will come out, but it's in the very advanced stages. And so hopefully within the next year or two, we might have this other book out there, but very different story, very different story.
Uh-huh. So as we come to the close of our show, is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh my gosh. Well, first, Divya, can I just say a big thank you for being there on the journey for my fiction writing. It was truly very important for me to have you with me. That's for sure. Uh, Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me on
I
the show.
Before you continue, I gotta say that you were amazing, Naveen. we went through so many hard decisions, folks. Just a quick peek into the back of the scenes. There were decisions where Névine allowed herself to be challenged. She traveled the tough road so that she wanted the best for the readers. That's all I can tell you about her. She is a wonderful person, wonderful author with a lot of love to share.
Well, see, this is why it's so much fun to work with you. Divya will challenge you. She'll make you think, but then she'll support you all the way. So remember that if you're thinking of working with her. No, and thank you for having me on the show. It's new experience for me, and I hope your audience has enjoyed it. But my last message is the one that you will find in many areas of my website, and probably you've picked up on it through the conversations. I think we're in a point in history where the world needs people to connect up their brain and their hearts. Mm-hmm. I think we can do a lot of that through sharing stories. Mm-hmm. And so whether you're reading fiction and it makes you think or feel differently about the world, or you're sharing a book that you've liked with another person, that I think is a way of creating connections that is very positive, and we need some of that in the world right now.
Yes, beautifully said, Névine. It is so important, especially after the disconnect and isolation of past couple of years, that you connect with others, even if it is a smile, even if it is a wave, even if it is just picking up that phone and calling, or even if it's getting on a Zoom, or just going and having that coffee, or whatever it is. That connection is so priceless. What a beautiful message to share. So thank you for joining us and being open about your journey. It takes a lot to be vulnerable, and that's part of bringing authenticity to your life and storytelling in the truest form. So thank you, Névine. And thank you, listeners, for being with us for so many years. We love you and we appreciate you. And in the form of connection, this is a way where we connect and you reach out back to us. So thank you. And for those of you who are looking for a good read, go find Névine's book on www.nevinezariffa.com and enjoy it. Because a lot of hard work and love and thought and heart and head and emotions have gone into it. And listeners, of course, I'm here to support you. Reach out to me anytime and share with me how I can serve and support you. And also, last but not the least, thank you, Jason, for making it technically possible. Until next time, take care and be well.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.